Hello everyone and welcome to Burnt Toaster Productions. I'm your host, Burnt Toaster. I have something a bit different planned for today. Instead of my usual challenge run that involves running through the game's main quest, I decided to do a more objective and theme-based run. And it's themed along the holidays. Speaking of which, tell me what your favorite present you ever got was, or your favorite food to have during this time of the year in the comments section. Also, there's a little community post where you can vote on a modded Skyrim dungeon crawler run, or an all achievements run for Fable Anniversary for the 100 subscriber special. Pretty sure I'm going to suffer regardless, so just choose the one you'd like to see more. As always, the mod list for this video will be in the description below. Anyway, let's get into the video. For this run, I decided to be some variation of Santa. Of course, in Skyrim, there's no such thing as Christmas or Santa, but there is a Breton holiday that is pretty much the Elder Scrolls equivalent, Saturalia. I really hope I'm saying that right. If not, I apologize. So the goal is to go to each major and minor city, get into as many houses or chambers as possible, raid the place for festive or sweet foods and drinks, then give everyone a gift of some sort. However, if they don't have any, or if someone sees me in the house, let's just say the only gifts their relatives will receive is a letter regarding their inheritance. Children will be mostly exempt from this since you can't physically harm them, and even if I could, I'd still refrain from doing it because it's a bit twisted to do that. Before we jump into the festive gift giving, I have to make the character. Since Saturalia is a Breton holiday, I decided to make our old man here a Breton. I tried to make him look as close to Santa as I could, but I did have to take some creative liberties since I'm working with Bethesda's character creator. After that, it's time to name him. Considering this version of Santa is going to be a bit demented, I decided to name him Old Nick. Now I can choose my start. With the alternate start mod, I'm able to choose a pretty big variety of beginnings. Some are tougher than others, but I had one in mind for this particular run. Because Santa visits you when you're sleeping, I decided to start as a vampire, which will make sneaking through houses and raiding their larder a bit easier. However, sunlight is something I'll want to avoid as much as possible since it stops the natural regeneration of health, stamina, and magicka. And if I don't feed over time, I'll start taking damage from the sun. Since most of the individuals aren't hostile where I spawned, I decided to take a bit of time to loot what was available to me, mostly because Nick is going to have to engage in a touch of capitalism to acquire the needed clothing and ride for this run. During my travels, I decided to stop at Embershard Mine since it was close by and I know it's a decent place to get more loot. I also wanted to get some experience for my sneak skill. As usual, the bandits here don't stand a chance. Anyway, I take a carriage to Dawnstar and find the Saturalia merchant. He's got the clothes I need and the reindeer to really complete the appearance. The reindeer is the most expensive part of all of this because the bill of sale costs about 1,500 septims, which meant I had to sell a decent amount of stuff, but at least Old Nick here looks the part. With that said, it's almost time to start being a menace to society. Due to me selling most of the items I acquired, I needed to restock, so I went to White River Watch, dealt with the bandits there, and took as much stuff as I possibly could. Then I made my way to my first destination, Riverwood. It's typically the first minor city you'll find in a standard playthrough, so why not start there? It's also fairly small, so it would give me a good trial run of what I want to do. The first house I went into was Alvor and Sigrid's house. Out on their table, they had a festive sweet roll and some hot cocoa. I also found 2 mince pies in a gift box for some reason. That's weird, but I'll roll with it. Of course, their child wakes up and spots me, so I had to leave the house and re-enter. Since I felt I had been given enough food and drink, I dropped off their gifts. I gave the child a new dress, Alvor got some more calcum, and Sigrid got a circlet. Next house was Sven's house. There was a nice amount of mince pies and a sweet roll on the table. I was feeling generous, so I gave Sven a complete set of iron armor and a steel war axe. As for his mother, I gave her fur armor, because I know old people often complain about being cold, so hopefully that'll help out. The next destination was the Riverwood Trader. I give Lucan the Iron Hand gauntlets and Camilla a wolf skin so she could probably have something to keep her warm at night. Of course, Lucan had spotted me, so I tried to take him out, but he's considered essential at the moment. I really wish Bethesda wouldn't make so many NPCs essential, but there's not much I can really do about it. I tried to use a mod that makes all NPCs vulnerable to their mortal fates, but I kept running into problems with it, so I uninstalled it. Next place was Hod and Gerder's house. The first food item I found was some steamed pudding, then a sweet roll, mince pie, and a couple of bottles of eggnog. I was happy enough with what they left, so I gave their boy a new blue tunic and gave Girder and Hod a single garnet to share. The last place I had visited was Fiendal's house. He didn't have much out, 3 or so mince pies and a tankard of hot cocoa. In return, I left him some iron arrows and a fishing rod. With gift giving and burglary done for Riverwood, I head off to eradicate some bandits, take their stuff, and go to White River Watch, since Whiterun is my next target. Outside of Whiterun, I decided to go into Pelagia Farm. Old Nick doesn't really like farmers, but it's the holiday season, so why not give them a chance? However, Nick is as blind as a mole, so he didn't see the boiled cream treats and apple pie sitting on their table as he was looking for festive food and drink. Due to that, he fell into a fit of rage and obliterated the people staying there. The next farm he visited was Chillfurrow Farm, and it's the same story as the last one. He did the same thing in Battleborn Farm as well. Nick finally came back to his senses and went into Whiterun proper. Since this was the first time visiting Whiterun in this save, I decided to skip the smith's shop and went inside the general goods store. Bellathor and his employee were saved by a bottle of eggnog and 2 mince pies. Or they would have been if it wasn't such a meager amount of food. Next place he broke into was Arcadia's Cauldron. Since she did leave something out and he wasn't really expecting it, he decided to give her a bottle of brandy. Since enough time passed, old Nick made his way to War Maidens. They didn't have anything besides 1 boiled cream treat, so you know what he decided to do. The next stop was Carlotta's house, except she was awake and cooking. She didn't spot him, so he went to Uthgerd's house, and there was a nice bit of stuff left out, so for being a good sport, Nick gave her an orcish battle axe. Although to me it looks a bit more like a bardiche, but still she'll probably appreciate it nonetheless. Back in Carlotta's house, she finally went off to another room, but Nick didn't like the fact that she was still awake, so he took out his dagger and canceled her breathing certificate. This time though, he still took the food and ate it. Now it's time to hit up one of the big houses, specifically the House of Clan Battleborn. They actually had a decent amount of sweets lying around. As I was dropping gifts off, Idolaf came in and asked me if he could have some armor I dropped. I told him he could and then immediately took him down with my dagger. Speaking of daggers, I gave the kid an iron dagger. Pretty sure that's probably a little irresponsible, but hey, I just delivered the gifts. What someone does with them isn't really my concern. After I drop off the remaining gifts, I head to Ambron's house, and they actually have a cookie tin. I was going to give them some fine gifts, but Ambron's child spotted me, and while I can't do anything about kids directly, I can make them orphans. Happy Saturalia. I hope you enjoy Honor Hall Orphanage. Since it was getting to be daylight, I went to Whiterun Stables, took whatever treats I could find, ate them, and left everyone a gift. I then returned to White River Watch so I could wait for nightfall again, somewhere safe. Back in Whiterun, I get into House Greymane. I managed to grab some stuff from their house before someone threatened me. So I had to go back outside and re-enter. And because I was 90% sure I couldn't get rid of anyone in there, I gave them the gift of mercy rather than anything tangible. I then turned my attention to Heimskir's house. All he had was a sweet roll and some hot cocoa, so in return, I gave him a nice little hat. Next up is Jorvasker. This is more or less a bonus location for me, since gaining entrance to all of the faction HQs and delivering gifts would be more tedious, on top of the fact that I have to go through most of the living quarters and cities, and I only wanted to focus on the common folk. There was a pretty large amount of festive food, so I grabbed all that I could and then dropped my gifts off. Sadly, there wasn't much I could really give that was particularly great, which is another reason I decided against doing anything with the other faction buildings. Since I had given everyone I could think of gifts, it's time to get into Dragon's Reach. Ideally, I would have left the Jarl's gift in his chambers, but since there were 2 guards posted right outside his door, I decided against breaking into his room and left his gift of a welcome stone outside of his room. On my way out of Whiterun, I remembered about the drunken huntsman, and since the man behind the counter had spotted me, I had to get rid of him. Same thing for the other guy and Janasa. There was also Nazim, who had made it on the naughty list. I think you know what's about to happen. His wife was just unfortunate enough to be in the same room as him. Since there's a merchant right outside Whiterun, I bought a book because it was considered a spell tome. I was thinking it'd teach me a seasonally themed spell, but instead it gave me the location of the North Pole and that imposter Father Saturalia. I make it over there after a nice bit of swimming, go inside, take most of his food, eradicate all of his elves, steal his gifts, and hit him on the way out. Sadly, he's essential, so I can't bump off my competition, but old Nick will probably do his best to make him subservient and turn him into his very own butler after the holidays. Since I had found it as I was going to Riverwood, I decided to go to Rorikstead. The first building I decided to burgle was Calflop Farmhouse. They had left some treats out in the form of 2 apple pies, but someone decided to finally get into the house after 3 in the morning. Since they spotted me, I had to go outside and re-enter. Because I was spotted, I can't leave any witnesses. It's a shame too, since they actually left something out for me. Oh well, I can't have people seeing me. I sadly couldn't take her husband out since he was considered essential, but I suppose you could say my gift was a rather forceful divorce. Who knows, maybe he had a life insurance policy on her. On my way out, I saw a villager running and thought I may have acquired a bit of a bounty on my head. To make sure, I checked and it seems like I'm in the clear. The next building was Lemkill's farmhouse. The only thing they had out were 2 sweet rolls. Feeling insulted, Nick decided to take Lemkill out and leave. With that said, it's time to hit up Rorik's Manor. I was thinking since it was a manor, there'd be some good food and drink in there. Turns out I was wrong to assume that since there weren't any sweets lying around. So, looks like the manor is going to be up on the market soon and at a steal since there were a couple of deaths that took place inside the building. There's still one more place to go, and that is Frostfruit Inn. I decided to take all of their food and drink and leave a gift. While I was spotted several times, I waved it as I knew the story behind Eric, and I couldn't bring myself to do what I normally do in this situation. I dropped off an elven dagger, a steel war axe, and some banded iron armor. Because it took very little time to get through Rorikstead, I decided to visit Winterhold next. It's another pretty small place, and Nick was getting a bit peckish after not consuming the red liquid everyone is filled with. I head into Berna's oddments, take the festive drinks behind her, use vampire seduction, feed, and head upstairs to grab whatever else was left. After grabbing everything, I eat and drink the items she left out, and gave her some fine clothing. Next building was Kraldar's house. All that was here was a few bottles of brandy, some sweet rolls, a honey nut treat, and a snowberry pie. A pretty nice haul, all things considered. I dropped Kraldar an amulet of Julianos, and the other guy got an elven dagger. Now it's time for the Jarl's Longhouse. Most of what I found consisted of brandy and potions, which I'll gladly take. I then gave the kid upstairs a dagger and the Jarl some soul gems since I saw a collection of them on a shelf. Now it's time to head to the Frozen Hearth. After gathering all the consumables I could find, I gave the innkeeper a circlet as their gift. Still feeling like I hadn't done enough to warrant a break, I head off to Dunstar. Shouldn't be too bad, it is yet another fairly small place after all. After waiting 12 or so hours in the inn, I head to Rustleaf's house. I had to wait for the both of them to go to sleep, but considering the circumstances in Dunstar, that's perfectly fine. After taking their food, I dropped them an iron ingot, a hammer, 2 gold ingots, and a flawless garnet. Next place was League Elf's house, which had an okay variety of stuff to eat and drink. In return, I gave an almost complete setup for armor and a bottle of wine. Next up was Brina's house. No one was in there, so it was the perfect opportunity to take their food and drink as well as appropriate some of their stuff to use as gifts for others. For the gifts, I left some food in a chest, some fur armor, fur shoes, hide bracers, a ring of the minor squire, and a cheery holiday hat. With that done, it's time to go to Ergnir's house. Once again, no one was there and they had an alright variety, so for the gift, I left a near-complete set of hide armor as well as a ring of Saturalia. On my way out, Ergnir had spotted me and suddenly she fell over. I still left the gifts for whoever finds her in her house. Next place to visit is the Mortar and Pestle. Not finding anything downstairs, I go to the upper level and only find a sweet roll along with 2 bottles of eggnog. Then I heard the proprietor walking up the steps, waited until she got into bed, moved a little too fast, and was detected. After that disappointment, it's time to move on and break into Bathild's house. There's not much there, but to be fair, it's a pretty small place. I left a circlet there for her and got out. Now I can go to the Jarl's place. After gathering all of the consumables I could find, I left the Jarl an elven dagger in his bed, which may seem a bit threatening now that I think about it, but I'm sure it'll be fine. Rather than take the carriage, I decided to get on Rodney, that's the reindeer by the way, and physically get to my next destination myself. Of course, the roads were dangerous, and included this group of bandits that made Rodney run away as I was going towards the Archer. Looks like I'll have to go the rest of the way on foot. Eventually I make it to Morthal, mostly alive, or mostly undead since vampires are a type of undead creature. Anyway, I chose the first place I'll break into, which is High Moon Hall. The only reason I decided to do the Jarl's Hall first is because I simply felt like it. I left her a fancy circlet and then went to grab the treats I deserved. There wasn't much here in terms of food and drink, so I took some gold as well as a number of potions to help me out on the road. The next house to visit is Alva's house. As soon as I got in there was a guy just standing there menacingly, and when I tried moving, he spotted me instantly, which initiated combat. I dealt with the attacker quickly, and then Alva herself popped in, which meant I had to fight her as well. I did remember there was a vampire in one of these buildings, but didn't realize it was this one until she and I fought each other. She was substantially tankier than I thought she'd be. After a little while of fighting, I gave her the gift of sweet release from this plane of existence. I then took whatever I wanted since they both attacked me. Moving on, I went to Phalian's house next. I decided to exit, wait a few hours, and re-enter since everyone was still awake. Phalian was still awake when I re-entered, but I know he's essential, so I have to leave him be. Besides, he was nice enough to leave something out, so I gave him a circlet in return. Thonir's house was up next. Not a whole lot of food to gorge upon, but a nice little variety, so I gave him a woodcutter's axe and a gold necklace. For the boys staying there, I gave him a flute. Who knows, maybe Thonir and the kid can practice together. Next place was the thaumaturgist's hut. I didn't find much, only 2 mince pies, and that's it. So I gave the proprietor a bottle of magic of Saturalia. The only place left to visit is the Moorside Inn. I grabbed everything I wanted and left a gold ingot as a gift. As I was checking to make sure I had gotten into every house, I stumbled upon this fisherman, so I gave him a fish. I then left to go to Solitude since it'll probably be the second most annoying city to go through. Once I get to Solitude, I make the most of the opportunity I have in front of me and start getting into places. First stop is Angeline's Aromatics. I didn't find anything of note besides a nice amount of potions and a single sweet roll. I left Angeline a gold ingot in her room and made my way out of there. My next target was Bits and Pieces. I pretty much find 3 sweet rolls and a bottle of eggnog immediately. As for gifts, I did what I've done for most of this video and gave the kid a dagger, because why not? Daggers and knives are cool. The parents got a gold ingot, steel ingot, and a ring of minor smithing. Before leaving, I checked behind the counter and found some goodies for me to enjoy, which was mostly more eggnog and a couple of healing potions. Sadly, it was daylight out, which meant I had to stay at the inn for a little while. Next night, I head off to Radiant Raiment. I'm going to be honest, I wasn't expecting them to have anything left out, but they pleasantly surprised me. After gathering my food and drink, I gave them 2 gold ingots. The next house I visited was Advar's house. You know, I haven't mentioned this before, but I'm happy I'm doing this run. A nice amount of these houses feel pretty cozy. Coziness aside, I have food and or drink to raid for and gifts to give. I took their festive treats and gave them a mostly complete set of steel armor as well as a silver sapphire necklace. Continuing on, I paid Yvette's house a visit. I didn't find any festive food or drink, so they paid the price. Of course, afterwards I found out they had 2 sweet rolls, but oh well, it was a poor amount of sweets for me to turn back time. Next place to hit up was Jala's house. I immediately found some floor pies. My favorite, just like Mama used to make. Anyway, I gave the executioner a circlet and a lute, then gave Jala that doll she always wanted and a garnet. Next one was Vittoria Vici's house. I'm thankful they had some appropriate foods for Nick to enjoy because if they didn't, I would have had to leave the house and that's it. In return, I gave them a potion of cure poison and a potion of health. I have a feeling someone is going to need one of those. My next target was Eriker's house. Not much there, just a sweet roll, some hot cocoa, and 2 or so bottles of eggnog. In return, I gave Eriker a potato to snuggle up with, although I did find some more sweet rolls and a couple of honey nut treats. I then gave the other 2 people staying here a circlet and gilded wrist guards. Time to head to Breiling's house, and boy did it feel like Saturalia for Nick. Plenty of food and some decent potions, although Breiling probably got a gift she wasn't wanting as I dropped off a steel axe for the old man and gave her a lute. Now it's time for the Blue Palace. There was plenty of food and drink to go around. Recognizing the hard work of the cook and kitchen staff, Nick dropped them off a gift. A bottle full of Spirit of Saturalia, which will completely restore someone's stamina. As for Elsa herself, she got a ring of Saturalia. Of course, there were still a couple of other places to break into, such as the Solitude Blacksmith. There was a distinct lack of food and drink, so Heimvar fell into the deepest sleep possible. Then it was time to go next door to Fletcher. Nick saw some fancy crossbows that would make wonderful gifts for someone, so he broke into the display case and took them. After prowling around and finding no suitable food or drink, Nick made sure to take care of business. Once that is done, it's time to take all the food and drink from the inn. As a thank you, Nick dropped off his last gold ingot and left to deliver more gifts. On my way out of Solitude, I had a bit of a realization. Nick hasn't visited Dragon Bridge, and since he's on his way out of Solitude, there's no better time than now. But since there weren't a lot of buildings to break into, he decided to do so in broad daylight. First place was Reindeer's house. There were more treats than I thought there'd be, so I dropped off a bow and 15 steel arrows to go with it. The next house is... I'm not going to even attempt to pronounce that name. Once again, not a lot of treats, but more than what I was expecting. I dropped off 2 steel daggers. On my way out, I gave this old lady an amulet of Saturalia. After that light work, it's time to visit the tavern and steal whatever applicable food and drink is available. Besides the Jarl grade tea, Nick hates the stuff. The woman behind the counter spotted Nick, which means there'll be another owner soon. And of course, since he was spotted when he was trying to take some stuff, he had to deal with the woman who stepped up to the counter. And since Varnius had to taunt Nick, he had a not-so-fun accident. Now it's time to hit the road. The next destination Nick went to was Karthwasten. It's pretty much the one minor settlement around Markarth, and since Markarth is the next big place to go, why not stop by on the way there? Naturally, since it is currently daytime, Nick has to wait a little. First building was Karthwasten Hall, though that's mostly because it was right in front of me. Whoever lives here made sure they landed on Nick's good side, so they got an almost complete set of hide armor. Since this guy had spotted Nick and told him he had to leave, you know exactly what happened. His oxygen bill wasn't paid, and so Nick had to shut the line. The next house was Enman's house. There wasn't a single treat for old Nick, and he was told to leave. So after leaving and going back in, Enman lost his wife. Turns out Enman is essential. Afterwards, it was time to head to the miners' barracks. Since the food and drink was a bit lacking, I just dropped some random cheap weapons for them. Now that Karthwasten is good to go this holiday season, it's time to visit Markarth. Nick was feeling generous once again and decided to stop at Salvia's farm. The place was as bare bones as you could get. As you can imagine, Nick committed a couple of felonies. Turns out the woman here had the stuff in her inventory, but Nick isn't a pickpocket, so in his mind, he was still in the right. Anyway, time to move on to more buildings outside of the city. Once again, I'm not going to attempt to pronounce that name. Regardless, the first building I go into has absolutely nothing for Nick, and then the woman that lives there spotted him. So Nick went outside for a bit. When he went back in there, there was a dog that was barking up a storm. And Nick does what Nick does, which woke the child up as Nick was concluding his business with her mother. Yeah, I'll admit, Nick got pretty sloppy there, so now he's wanted in the Reach. He had to quickly hop onto Rodney and make a run for it. Luckily, Nick made it out alive, but now it would be best if he visited somewhere else for the time being. After running for his life, he settled on going to Falkreath next. It's a pretty small place for the most part, so it should be easy for Nick to handle. First building to be burgled was Greypine Goods, but Boland decided to be a bit difficult, so I had to leave and go back in. Boland was still hanging around the first floor, so Nick gave him a one-way ticket to the afterlife. Now Nick can peacefully grab whatever consumables he wants. He did find some stew, and after trying it, he decided it was something to look out for. As far as the gift goes, Nick left some fine clothes. Next place to raid was Lod's house. Sadly, at the moment, Lod cannot be dealt with for seeing Nick, so after grabbing what stuff he had, I dropped him a hammer, some tongs, and bellows. Next casual burglary target is Grape Concoctions. I also know you can't take care of Zarya because she is essential. Regardless, she did have some seasonal stuff to consume, even if it was just hot cocoa and stew, which sounds like a rather unappealing combination. So in return, I left her alone and gave her a ring of minor alteration. Next place I stopped by was Corpse Light Farm. They actually had some decent stuff, so I dropped a circlet off for whoever lives there. Just right next door, I have my next building, Dingir's house. After grabbing the decent amount of food and drink here, I left a garnet and an amethyst as gifts. Now it's time for the Jarl's Longhouse. There wasn't a huge amount of food and drink, but to be fair, there is a slight lack of surfaces to put the stuff on. Once Nick gathered everything, he gave the Jarl a bow called Saturalia Snowstorm, and some arrows to go with it. The next big destination is Windhelm. The way there was pretty uneventful, which I'm definitely not complaining about. Eventually I make it there and can start getting to work. The first stop in Windhelm is Naranya's house. There wasn't a whole heck of a lot of stuff, but at least someone left out some brandy for Nick, so he was pretty happy. Happy enough to drop a mostly full set of leather armor. Only thing that was missing was the helmet. Next place was Brunwolf Freewinter's house. Gathered up a couple of sweet rolls and a bottle of brandy, so in return I left them a Nordic crossbow that I stole from Fletcher back in Solitude. I also went ahead and broke into the Aretino residence. He did leave out a sweet roll for me, but instead of giving him a random gift from my inventory, I decided I'll do him one better and complete the task he thinks I was there for. I'll get to that later. Right now I have more houses to raid and more gifts to give. Anyway, it's time to pay the Dark Elves a little visit, starting with the Atherin residence. To my surprise, there were some festive foodstuffs and drinks lying around, so for leaving those out, I dropped a gold ruby necklace. After the Atherin residence, I decided to break into Sadri's used wares. I didn't find a single treat left out besides some potions, and that was more or less part of his stock. I then exited, waited, and re-entered so I could get rid of him. At first I didn't see him, so I was about to let bygones be bygones, but then he had the audacity to appear in front of me like Houdini, and he spotted me. So I had to go back out, break in again, and show him how we do things around here. Since I'm here in the Grey Quarter, I decided to visit the new Nice's Corner Club. It wasn't as easy as usual to grab my rightful treats. The place is decently well lit and small, so that meant I was under constant supervision. Still, I left some gifts upstairs as a reward. Getting out of the Grey Quarter, I head over to the opposite side and get into the blacksmith quarters. Straight out of the gate, I find a bottle of brandy and a sweet roll, plus another 2 bottles of brandy upstairs. It's not a lot, but I'm pretty sure Nick is at least a bit inebriated after drinking that much in one sitting, so he left the people staying there a blacksmith's apron along with a pair of shoes and gloves, as well as 2 chunks of iron ore. The next place he went into was a white vial. Even though I was spotted, I'm like 80% sure that one, if not both of these individuals are essential. So I head upstairs to look for food, much like a raccoon. All I grabbed was a sweet roll, an apple pie, and some steamed pudding. For the food, I dropped off a couple of sets of clothing. With those gifts given, it's time to take a gander at Candlehearth Hall. There was a pretty good amount of stuff, as is the case with most inns or taverns. After gathering all of the food and drink I could find, I go and give the gift of 1 amethyst. I then go out of Candlehearth Hall and visit Viola's house. All I find is some hot cocoa and 2 bottles of brandy, so I left some magic of Saturalia on Viola's bed. No, that is not a euphemism. Stop it. The next domicile I chose to pilfer through was the House of Clan Shattershield. Within the dining area, I found a mince pie, a sweet roll, 2 bottles of wine, and 2 bottles of brandy. For one gift, I dropped a hunter's bow and 10 iron arrows to go with it. For another, I gave an amulet of minor blocking, and in the last room, I find another pie and a bottle of brandy, so they got a circlet. Next one to be burgled was the House of Clan Cruelty. Everything was fine until someone who was marked as essential spotted me. So I did as Nick usually does and retaliated. That didn't end well. I mostly got to the other side of Windhelm when I was spotted by a guard, since I'm wanted. I had to make a mad dash out of the city because they were out to skin me alive. In light of that, I decided to head off towards Riften. On my way there, I came across Shore's Stone, which is a pretty small place, so I decided to go ahead and do my thing. First house I hit up was Sylgia's house. I found a snowberry pie, a sweet roll, some hot cocoa, and a bottle of eggnog. In return, I gave Sylgia some reading material. Next, I go into Oddfell's house. There wasn't much, a couple of mince pies, a sweet roll, and a tankard of hot cocoa. As for the gift, I gave them 2 sets of clothing. After that, I head over to Filnjar's house. I didn't see a single thing left for Nick, so Filnjar got nicked with Nick's dagger. With all that done, it's time to make way to Riften. The journey there wasn't the most ideal, mostly because I got lost in the beginning and ran into a bear. Once I turned around and started heading the right way, things were relatively calm. Eventually, I make it to Riften and have to pay to get in, but once I do, I can get to work. I started with Bully's house since it was quite literally right there. I didn't find anything, so I decided to take my frustrations out on Nevinor. Of course, Bully came in after the fact, became a bit distraught over his wife, spotted me, and went to bed. This time I didn't have to exit the building, so I went back up there and got rid of the witness. Now that that mess has been taken care of, I can go into Aaron's house. Thankfully, there were some goodies left out, which means I can do a little gift giving. I gave Aaron some fur armor, and Mule received a steel mace. After that, I went into Snowshod Manor. Inside, I found some hot cocoa, steamed pudding, and a couple of bottles of eggnog. Nira got a silver ring, the old man got a couple of books, and the other guy got a bow and 10 iron arrows. Then I decided to go through Helga's bunkhouse, and immediately found some stuff, so that means Helga is safe. After dropping her gift off, I look around for more things to eat and drink. I went upstairs and found people sleeping in some beds. Because they were good sports and were asleep, I was feeling generous. I gave them some gifts. All of one side got iron daggers, and the other side got a set of fine clothes, a set of merchant clothes, and a festive hat. Before leaving, I double-checked to make sure I grabbed everything, and it's a good thing I did check since I didn't grab all of the food and drink. After getting done with Helga's bunkhouse, I head over to the Pond Prawn. 2 bottles of eggnog were all I found. While disappointing, it's still something relatively festive, so they get 2 torches total, and that's all. Naturally, I double-checked myself when I went back up to the ground floor and found some steamed pudding along with 2 tankards of hot cocoa. Next, I went to the Scorched Hammer. At first, I didn't think there was anything here, but I did find some stuff. It wasn't a lot, so I dropped off a blacksmith's apron, shoes, and a hammer. Since I was here in Riften, I finally went to Honor Hall Orphanage to show Grelod the business end of my dagger. And since the rest of the children were pretty happy, I decided to simply get out of there. With my only gifted service done, I go to Romlin Dreth's house. There's nothing and no one here. I decide to leave and break into Valendor's house. Once again, there's no one there, but at least there was a snowberry pie and some eggnog. So Valendor gets a gift in the form of a silver amethyst ring. After that, I go into Maurice Aravel's house. I didn't find much, just 2 boiled cream treats and an apple pie. Still, at least something was left out, so I dropped off my gift of a child's doll. The next place I went into was Elgrim's Elixirs. All they had was a sweet roll, so I gave them some horsehide and a wolf pelt. With all that done, it's finally time for me to get into Mistvale Keep. After taking all the stuff on the tables, I go into the back and leave a gift. The gift in question being a gold ruby necklace. But I did see that the Jarl's chambers were upstairs, so both the steward and Jarl will get something this time around. I left the Jarl a silver sapphire necklace, mostly because I did find some more food and whatnot up there. Now that I'm done giving gifts in Riften, I head off to go to Iverstead as it is relatively close by, and it is a minor settlement, so it should be quick and easy. Getting to work, I break into Klimek's house. There wasn't a single festive treat in there, and Nick wasn't happy, so he decided to extend this fellow's nap time. Sadly, he was marked essential, so Klimek is simply not getting anything this year. I then go into Felstar Farm to see if anyone there left anything for poor Nick. No one in this building did, and with my luck, all 3 or so people are probably essential, so I decided to simply leave the building. Man, this place sucks. Even the inn didn't have anything, and the man behind the counter is also considered essential. Not a single bit of festive food or drink in sight, and a nice amount of people that have been blessed by the divines. With his rage boiling over, Nick went into Felstar Farm to vent his frustrations, and it looks like I was right. They're all essential. Thanks, Bethesda. After that disappointing revelation, I head back to Windhelm. I need to go tell Aretino that I completed his task, and I still need to give Ulfric something. Since I need to finish a bit of gift giving, I decided to do just that. I do what I usually do, and that's take any piece of festive food and drink that's available, except for that tea. Nick still hates it. Once all the food and drink has been grabbed, it's time to get into Ulfric's room. There are guards patrolling the area, but the good thing is they always leave a little window of opportunity. Once I get into his room, I grab any extra stuff and leave him a ring of stamina. Now all I have to do is get out and tell Aretino the good news. Although I don't think he quite understands what Saturalia is all about because he gave me his family heirloom as payment. Of course, I simply dropped it and left. With all my tasks in Windhelm finished, it's time for Nick to go to Markarth and finish his gift-giving extravaganza there. I won't be able to maneuver through the city unimpeded with the guard coming after me, so I decided to try to use my ability to sneak and finish up the left-hand mine area first. With that said, I got into Skaggy's house. There was nothing there, so you know exactly what happened. I then went into the miners' barracks to see if they had anything. They didn't, and these two kept staring at one another, so I quickly dealt with them. With the mine area good to go, I approached Markarth, and it seems even with my stealth, a guard noticed me. Well, guess Nick will just have to pay the fine and have some of the gifts he intended to give away taken from him. On the bright side, he's in the city, which means he can start giving what gifts he has left. The first stop was Arnleif & Sons Trading Company. Somehow one of them saw me and told me I had to leave, so I exited the building and went back in. It was a bit close because as soon as I got rid of the man who asked me to leave, Lisbeth started to get up. Too bad for her, I was faster. Next target was the Treasury House. They had some stuff left out for Nick, so that meant I could give someone a gift. I left 8 silver garnet rings in what appeared to be Thonar's room. After wandering around a little bit, I found the next place to visit, Endon's house. Only thing I found was a tankard of hot cocoa, some steamed pudding, and a sweet roll. I went ahead and dropped off a gold ring, a set of clothes, and a steel dagger for the kid. Right under Endon's house was Ogmund's house. There was some stuff left out, so I gave him a fishing rod and a set of clothing. When I was done, I went into the Silver Blood Inn. Once I gathered all the food and drink, I dropped off a set of merchant's clothes and a silver sapphire necklace. My next destination was the Hag's Cure. There was some food and drink along with a couple of potions just left out. I left a ring of minor health and a silver necklace. but I decided to root around a little bit more and found the holy grail of desserts, an entire cheesecake in a gift box. Nick was quite happy with it, but he's got more work to do before he can retire for a year. He chose to go to the Warrens. If there was anything in there, he would leave a gift in the room. If not, well, you know how Nick is by now. He did find a couple of mince pies and some eggnog in one room, so Nick dropped off a silver emerald necklace. Seeing even those worse off than anyone else leaving something out for him inspired him to give everyone in the Warrens something. In Kosnak's room, Nick left some armor. In another room, he left a ring of the Minor Knight and some iron boots. In Omluog's room, he left 2 amethysts. Now all Nick has left to do is get into Understone Keep, grab what he wants, and leave the Jarl a gift. After grabbing everything, Nick followed the Jarl to his quarters, waited for him to go to bed, and gave him a flawless garnet as well as a lute. However, I made one more stop at Riften. I was looking through my list of subscribers one day and found a public subscriber by the name of Snilf. Snilf is a beggar in Riften, and for being a subscriber, I decided to give him some gifts, which consisted of a hunting bow, 20 iron arrows, an iron sword, a ring of minor archery, and a silver sapphire necklace. Enjoy, my man. As you can tell, I thought I was done, but after checking a list of minor locations, I forgot about Kynes Grove. So I went over there to complete one more round of gift giving. The only thing really here is the Braidwood Inn. So after gathering the treats one final time, I gifted the owner 3 garnets, then gave Killed and Killed the Younger an iron dagger each. With all of that done, Nick retired to Embershard Mine, where he would remain a while before heading back to the North Pole. I know I more than likely missed some houses I didn't mean to. There were a couple that I decided not to go into, such as Blackbriar Manor, because they're not pleasant people. And I know there were probably a couple of minor locations I missed. I'm human and I make mistakes sometimes. Regardless, I hope you all enjoyed this little special. I should return to the more normal stuff next month. I'm hoping to have enough time to get that subscriber special done and uploaded for the 15th of January. If not, I'll be sure to let you all know. Anyway, this has been Burnt Toaster from Burnt Toaster Productions, and I shall see you all next time. Happy holidays, everyone.